Amanda Waller. Born in East St. Louis, Rhodes Scholar, PhD in political science, served in intelligence under 3 administrations. Disappeared from public life 4 years ago.
Am I supposed to be impressed? Maybe I should rattle off your resume now. You know, I could blow the whistle on you anytime I want.
Fine. Why don't we step into the light together?
That was Amanda Waller. And Amanda Waller and I have a very restricted relationship. Outside of the Justice League Unlimited, I didn't know a lot about her until I started going into, well, comics properly, which was New 52, where if you go by the image on the right, they anyway, she's different from the Amanda Waller we usually know of, which is this one here. And one thing I noticed about Amanda Waller going from those comics to other ones is she's kind of what's the word I want to look for?
Bitch.
Look for. Yeah, that's the one. But to be fair, she owns up to it. Her whole idea is a sort of control at all costs. The idea that, there are things that go bump in the night and, nothing should supersede um, the power of the US government, effectively. All right? And she'll do all sorts of nefarious things about it. If there's ever a reason to not trust the government, it's Amanda Waller. And, for someone who loves this kind of diversity, show me people of color in horrible roles of government, where everyone else is, I like that. But at the same time, she's just so terrible. Even when she's on the right, looking just. Anyway, anyway, anyway. The reason we're talking about Amanda Waller is because, well, she's been busy. New 52 brought her, the Suicide Squad, up to a new level. Primarily, they just added Harley into it. And that's what began the sort of Harley Quinn renaissance of less Joker, more Harley. And love or hate it, that's sort of what happened. But for the most part, I'd like to think that Waller has been sort of lately. I think that's the best way for it. Ever since the events of Dark Crisis. I'm sorry. Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. I never think I'm gonna have to keep saying that, but lo and behold, I do. Oh, the whole Justice League being disbanded for reasons which to me made no sense. It puts Amanda Waller on edge because, oh my god, they survived death. How they survived death, I'm not entirely sure. They just sort of like remembered, got over it. It's like, hey, this is getting out of hand. So, to the powers that be, Waller has now been granted freedom to move, to be the problem, to be that bitch. Pretty much. More than she has been before. And that is sort of what's been going on since Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. Alright? With the events of Night Terror's First Blood, we see her acting out, culminating in the character of Dr. Hate, who I barely remember. He did something like Titans Beast World or something. Um, we see her get a major figure in the Green Arrow book on Joshua Williamson. Primarily, Waller's been this big figure in the DC universe since the events of Dark Crisis. Even coming into the story of House of Brainiac, where, Waller recruits slash manipulates Brainiac's quote unquote daughter. It's, that was weird. And of course, she's working on with the United Federation of Planets. Uh, it's having them install a quarantine around Earth, which was also kind of hilarious. Like, Waller's sort of doing everything right, and we're kind of seeing where this comes off here. And I like that she's just sort of there in the background. And what's really good about that is how it plays off of the idea of the state of the DC universe, because the Just League is disbanded. This tight knit group of superheroes isn't tight knit anymore. It's really just the Titans. And so we even see her later on during the events of the Failsafe arc with Chip Zdarsky. And love or hate Zdarsky's Batman, I think it's possibly the most even-ish Batman. When it misses, it misses, but I think for the most part it was solid, but whatever. We see her working with the Batman Zur-En-Arrh in the failsafe suit. And this is all designed to lead to one thing and one thing only. That's right, absolute power. All right, so absolute power is this sort of culmination of everything Waller's been working hard to accomplish. And you know what? I'm going to give it to her. She put in the work for this, which is why it's so hard for me to take it from her. Seriously, she's decided to use her resources to depower a bunch of superheroes, including Superman, which is always like the thing for him. She's utilizing social media to instill hatred of superheroes, namely showing superheroes doing not so superhero-y things. Primarily, this is also built off the idea of night terrors, and now we see a divided superhero universe sort of stuck, sort of caught on the back foot by something that they really should have been prepared for. Even the Daily Planet has been hacked, courtesy of Waller and her new Suicide Squad, having renamed the Hall of Justice the Hall of Order, working with a whole bunch of new different figures, old and new from the DC Universe, and swaying the public on her side. It's a full on war, and the Justice League, or the superhero community as a whole, has been caught totally unaware. This is ultimately Waller's biggest victory, and honestly, I can't help but feel she's deserved it. Using the Amazo robots, each being inhabited with the personality of Batman across the multiverse, she begins her sweep or purge of the superhero community. It's all they can do to just sort of not only survive, but also attempt to mount some form of defense against her. And again, when you do the work, it's kind of hard not to feel, yeah, you know what? Give her flowers, give her roses. But the superhero community will eventually pull together. And the fun thing is, or even the frightening thing is, Waller has, again, done the work, all right? Capitalizing on night terrors and the public's new fear of superheroes, which didn't pay off in any real sort of way before that, using Beast World, using House of Brainiac, using Failsafe, utilizing the sort of lack of faith people have in superheroes to initiate these sort of purges, I think works. And then we see how far Man of War is willing to go on another level, i.e., using the multiverse and evil people from the multiverse. It's sort of weird and a bit hypocritical. And really, we sort of get this idea that Waller doesn't just distrust superheroes, she hates them. And I think that is sort of where the problem comes from. But even more, we do see, I want to emphasize exactly some of the messed up stuff Waller has done. Not just the multiversal army, but she kidnapped John Kent, experimented on him, made him effectively a living Amazo. Or Cyborg Superman 2.0. Was there a Cyborg Superman 2.0 before that? I personally would think it would be Green Lantern Corps. And I'm sorry, Sinestro Corps, Cyborg Superman. Everything's always a step up when you give it a Green Lantern ring. But even more so, she effectively made it so magicians couldn't use magic. That created an identity crisis with Zatanna, because as she pointed out in the Superman tie-in for it, is that, you have a costume, you have powers, you get to call yourself Superman. Zatanna isn't a code name, it's my name. Alright? Magic is who I am. Great moment, great moment. Um, we see it's just so hard to not feel Waller kinda deserved to win. It felt like we should have gone like a tangent timeline, and as much as I hate that trope now and then, it was nice to see them sort of not do that, like, "No, we're just gonna pull the plug on this right now." It was a good feeling in that way too. But ultimately, this was all going to come undone, courtesy of Green Arrow revealing that he was always on the inside, and Nightwing having recorded her entire confession of what she'd done. So, it was what it was. At the same time, though, there was something really good that came from it, unintended as not, i.e., changes to the status quo. Namely the fact that, um, as Barry and Wally point out, they can't sense the vibrational frequency of the multiverse. So it feels like it's gone. And even more so for Barry, how that whatever that machine was that Wally was using messed with his powers, or at least the machine that took the powers and gave it back. Or as a matter of fact, it turns out people have gotten the wrong powers. And that leads to a sort of confrontation with Green Arrow, because apparently this was all Ollie's big plan. This whole situation where he decides, like, you know what? He plays along with Waller so he can get to the point where he can stop her. And the problem is he sort of betrayed everything. This even leads to a conversation with the Trinity versus Ollie. Like, hey, so let's talk about what's been going on here, all right? Several heroes are badly injured, including Animal Man, and everyone loves Animal Man. So how dare you hurt Animal Man? Red Tornado may be irreparable. So in other words, he might be done. Ollie has indirectly killed Red Tornado. Black Canary does not have a canary cry. She apparently has heat vision. Where she got that from, I don't know. Does that mean Clark doesn't have heat vision? Or Power Girl? Or John? Or Connor? Or Starfire? Does Starfire have heat vision? Martian Manhunter does. Oh, okay. Does that mean Manhunter now has a canary cry? That'd be wild. Plastic Man apparently is having problems. I wonder if that ties into his book going on. And of course, is the fact that, this huge level of trust that's been lost courtesy of Ollie. And Ollie points out, hey, look, you know what? I messed up, but you realize what the big problem was. When we split up, we created a vacuum. All right. And that's all Waller needed to push in. All right. Had we all been working together, we'd have all shared information. We'd have all seen this happening. We'd have all done what's necessary to make sure it didn't happen. And the Titans, bless their heart, they did a great job. But they're not us. I don't quite think this might be where the story sort of falls apart for me. At least, well, it's gonna fall apart anywhere, fall apart at the end, I guess. And this sort of what leads to the creation of Justice League Unlimited, which is nice, and it's definitely the reference to it. Overall, though, I think there's a problem with Absolute Power, and it's the fact that while I think it does a great job of panning itself out across the greater DC universe, i.e., we see Waller in all these different stories, different actions. There's not much of us seeing the actual DC Universe itself. In other words, we never see any fallout from the events of Night Terrors. We never see much from the events of Beast World. We never see much from the events of Failsafe or Brainiac Queen. That can often be because a lot of these self-contained events really just sort of had Waller in there, with the exception of Beast World and Night Terrors. And even more so, we do get a look into Waller's character, which I don't think was necessary, but seeing what made Waller who she is and why she does what she does, I felt was interesting, but at the same time, I thought maybe that was the point. Maybe John Ridley did sort of see, like, hey, you know what? Um, she may have a good origin, but she's always been terrible. And you could say the best part of her died in her origin, which led to her being her, the character that only Viola Davis can make somewhat likable. Bless that woman. Bless that woman. Ultimately, Absolute Power as a 4-issue event, I think, is fine, but I think to really appreciate it, you do need a sort of knowledge of what's going on in the greater DC universe. What's going on in Green Arrow's book, which really, really is married to Absolute Power. Um, Seeing exactly where the Amazos came from, you're going to want to see that too, as well as the Brainiac Queen stuff, I think, is also sort of, doesn't get the attention it deserves. And of course, there's these different Amazos, which don't really do much of anything outside of be a problem. And you know what? Sure, fine, whatever. But it always feels like we've missed out when we create all these unique, interesting characters and they don't really get to do much. Like, I think it would have been interesting if we got to see all of these different characters interact with their counterparts, which some of those books did. We got to see, well, we didn't see Last Son do much of anything with anyone really. There is Death Charge. Death Charge was in Atlantis, but not much for Arthur. There was the Jade Stone. Now, granted, Jade Stone did have an interaction with Alan Scott, and I think that mattered going forward. There is, I think Batman fans had enough of Failsafe. Love or hate him. I think they had enough of him. It would have been interesting to see a sort of conversation go on with him, especially when we find out that Nightwing has a partition part of himself too, in the sense of Zur and R. So that would have been interesting. Uh, the Velocity doesn't do much either, so there's that. Paradise Lost. Didn't do anything with that of note. Most of the Amazon just spent time either keeping the superheroes safe while they recovered or fixing John Kent. Hopefully, John Kent will break up with Jay Nakamura. over irreconcilable differences, i.e., over Dreamer, whatever. And of course, no one does anything with Martian Manhunter, so that tracks. If there's one thing I feel like it definitely is, Joshua Williamson really, and this is just my opinion, he really liked Infinite Crisis. All right, because this does feel like Infinite Crisis. We see Justice League that is divided, not working together, and what happens? Other powers that be that don't like the state of things, that are not a fan of superheroes, or at least this iteration of superheroes, come in and cause some problems. And it's only by uniting back together are we able to sort of fix this. And Nightwing does a thing, except he doesn't nearly die this time. So there's that. At the same time, I think the problem is, at least from my perspective. Now, I read Infinite Crisis. I read Identity Crisis. I liked half of Identity Crisis. I might have to revisit Identity Crisis to see how I really feel about it. But one thing I liked about that was, first of all, Infinite Crisis was way too big going on. All right, like as one of my earliest comic book reads, I have no idea who half those people were, or any of them. But you get the feeling that the DC universe is split, that everyone's going through their own sort of issues. I think dealing with the other members of that Suicide Squad, all those Amazos, should have been moments of clarity for the heroes. Realize, hey, you know what? We should have been together. We should have been unified. Whatever problems we had were not bigger than this. All right, but that would also mean addressing other problems in the DC universe that DC isn't going to address. So whatever. Is this a summer event of the season? No, because it ended in fall, the beginning of fall. But it did take place during the summer, so take or leave it. Um, Again, had there been more stuff going on in the background to sort of better connect these things, I think this event would have been better received. And then again, ah, it all depends on how you feel about it. I do feel like just sort of like it makes a mistake a lot of events do, which is sort of like ends. The superheroes like, oh hey, we've got our stride. We've got our stride. Can't stop us. Can't stop us. Can't stop us. And we go unopposed. There we go. I think it was missing the human aspect, i.e., what did the people on the ground think? And other people mention this too, like, hey, we're seeing like Amanda Waller puts out fake images of superheroes committing, acts of terror. Did anyone just go like, Firestorm's there, but he's literally outside? Or even people that still believed in superheroes, like, hey, you know what? Yeah, Night Terrors was messed up, but those are not my superheroes. All right, Firestorm would never do that because he doesn't have a book to do it in. Or, hey, did anyone really believe for a minute that Superman would go around terrorizing people like he did in Superman the animated series? No, no, they were like, nah, it's clearly injustice, Superman. Clearly injustice. That's that Earth 3 Superman, the one that seemed Italian in the Crisis on Two Earths movie. Like you remember that one? He even called himself Crime Families. It was weird. No, that's not Batman. That's Owlman. Yeah, trust me, it's Owlman. I think that aspect is missing too. I think ideally, also the Titans didn't do anything wrong, but this whole story ends like the Titans, yeah, they did all right, but they're not us. I'm like, that hasn't been proven. It's like they're afraid to like have the Titans fail, which is another thing that I know. I said I would do it, and you know what? Maybe I will. Maybe I will. But ultimately, at some point, we have to have the conversation about Dark Crisis and where it fundamentally dropped the ball, as well as I think the greater story the DC Universe is trying to say. And honestly, I'm not saying Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths, is a bad story in itself. What I'm saying is the DC Universe that has this story isn't telling it the way it should be told. I think it would have been better suited had they just owned up and embraced Future State in some form other than what they put it as. But overall, like I said, if you're looking for a fun story with some great takes, some great art, and covering a couple of tie-ins for books that you probably already were reading anyway, I'd say give it a read. Watch Waller ascend to heights she never thought imaginable, and then watch her crumble down in what's actually one of the greatest defeats ever. That ending for Waller was actually perfect. Almost perfect. If you read her origin, you probably do see where I want that story to really go. But anyway, with that in mind, this brings to a close here. If you do the bug thing, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. What do you think of Absolute Power? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you feel it needed some work? I think it needed a bit of overall tweaking for the greater tapestry it was telling, but I think outside of the ending, it was fine. It was fine. It was engaging. It was what I expected, honestly. Anyway, with that in mind, this brings to a close here. This is Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching as always. May your fandom serve you well.